Hello and welcome to Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us. This week, the city of Jackson feels the sharp end of the governor's veto pen.
Jackson is not one suburban golf course and relaunch planetarium away from thriving. It needs serious investment in safety.
We take the position that the vetoes are improper.
House Speaker Philip Gunn talks with 12 News about the governor's vetoes of funding initiatives around the capital city, with the latest exchange between Capitol Street and High Street wind up in court. We'll also recap the 2022 session with the top House Republican this Sunday on Mississippi Insight. We always look forward to talking with Speaker Gunn, the Clinton Republican who holds critical powers in policymaking at the state capitol. But when the governor last Thursday vetoed provisions within a key legislative budget allocation, we had plenty more to discuss. Governor Tate Reeves says that he balks at spending the more than $13 million cost of an expansion at the state's LaFleur's Bluff complex. It's located in Jackson. Features included a brand new Trent Jones 10-hole golf course and family-oriented recreation. This week, he also vetoed $2 million to renovate Jackson's ailing planetarium and $1 million for a new parking lot at the Jackson Convention Center. The first-term Republican governor says funding these projects would be a misappropriation of taxpayer dollars.
City leader complained because the state was only going to provide $25 million for the needs of the water and sewer systems in Jackson. And what he, for whatever reason, failed to disclose is the only reason Jackson is limited to $25 million is because between the nearly $95 million that the city and Hinds County received in ARPA funding directly, that they only allocated that $25 million, or some 25% roughly, to their water and sewer needs. Let's be clear. The only reason the city of Jackson may only receive $25 million at max is because that's all they have in their coffers to put up as a match.
Governor Reeves added that Jackson needs to invest more to address staff shortages at the police department. This news broke Thursday just as House Speaker Gunn joined us by Zoom for a pre-scheduled interview. We'll get to a broader discussion of the 2022 session later, but listen to what the Speaker had to say about Governor Reeves' action with these partial vetoes.
Let's look at some of the news that broke this morning, Thursday morning. Governor Tate Reeves vetoed several budgetary line items, including a $13+ million expansion plan at the state's LaFleur's Bluff complex in Jackson and money for Jackson's planetarium renovation. These are among several vetoes of the governor, both full and partial. Any reaction to this round of vetoes, and any of them harder for you as a House Speaker to swallow?
Well, we take the position that the vetoes are improper. As you may recall, last year there was a dispute between some of the vetoes that the governor did on some appropriation bills, and the Supreme Court ruled, in our judgment, they changed 100 years of case law and gave the governor a power that he did not previously have. This year, however, this bill that he chose to make these vetoes out of is not an appropriation bill. It's a general bill. And so we take the position that those vetoes are improper and not permitted at all under the law. And so that is something we're going to be looking at.
So if they're not improper, what can you do?
Well, you could make a legal challenge. You could make a legal challenge. I'm not aware of any provision under the law that allows the governor to veto partially a general bill. He has to veto all of it or none of it. You can't pick parts of it. And that may be more than people that they want to understand, but there's a difference of the types of bills that we have up here. There's appropriation bills, there are general bills, there are tax and revenue bills. The voting threshold changes each time based on what kind of bill that it is. And what the Supreme Court ruled last year pertained only to appropriation bills. This is not an appropriation bill. This is a general bill. And there's no provision under the law that we know. Again, this happened this morning, so I'm still trying to digest it, and I'm out of town. But there's no provision under the law that we know of that allows the governor to partially veto a general bill.
So folks who are hearing this, who might walk away and say, hey, that project LaFleur was the golf course, it's dead now, or the renovations to the planetarium, they're dead now. That may not be the case as of right now.
Well, that will yet to be determined.
Let's look at the 2022 legislative session overall. You expressed already that this was a very productive session. Talk about the highlights from your perspective this year.
Well, thank you, Byron. You're exactly right. This is one of the most historic sessions certainly in my political career, but maybe in quite some time with the legislature. I've said it repeatedly. There were a number of very weighty issues that we were tasked to deal with. I remember one of the media outlets early on wrote an article on the first day of the session questioning whether or not the legislature could get done all it had to get done. And I'm proud to say that we checked every box and we got many great things done, any of which would have been a great accomplishment in and of themselves, and any of which could have expended a lot of political capital. But this year we did about 9 major legislative items, policy items that I'm very proud of, starting with the income tax. We cut the income tax by 1/3. That's going to put money back into put money back in the pockets of our hardworking citizens. We did, it's the largest tax cut in the history of the state. We did the largest teacher pay raise in the history of the state. We raised our starting salaries of teachers beyond the national average. We dispersed $1.5 billion worth of ARPA funds, which are going to go to projects around the state, half of which is going to water and sewer projects around the state. We passed 2 major workforce development bills that will hopefully improve our career technical training around the state. We passed the Equal Pay Act, which provides a remedy for women who contend they have not been paid equal to their male counterparts.
You talked about the tax cut measure. It was ultimately a compromise between the House and the Senate negotiators. You wanted to institute a complete elimination of the state income tax over time. Frankly, the Senate told you no. Are you satisfied with the deal as it passed? And will you revisit the income tax next year?
Well, we have always contended that elimination is the goal, and it should be the goal. And I think we're going to continue to work towards that goal. However, the plan that we ultimately agreed to was so good that we just couldn't walk away from it. We basically eliminated about 1/3 of the income tax. We felt like that was a substantial step in the right direction, so we were able to come to an agreement with them on that. Well, what it does basically, and this is a very, very general statement, but individuals can calculate how much money this will put back into their pockets. Basically, you get $100 for every $10,000 of income. So if you make $40,000 a year, you'll get $400 back. You make $100,000 a year, you'll get $1,000 back. That's just a very rough rule of thumb, if you will, that taxpayers can use to see how this will impact them in the future. And of course, this is at full phase in, which is over a 4-year period of time. But we believe that puts money back into our citizens' pockets. It allows them to better able to provide for themselves, provide for their families, give to their church. Those dollars turn over in the community, and it improves economic prosperity for the businesses. So there are a lot of benefits to putting money back in the pockets of the citizens.
There has been quite a bit of criticism of income tax elimination. Now listen to what the Daily Journal's editorial board wrote back in March. It said, it is akin to the plan that nearly bankrupt Kansas. It would be absolutely disastrous. Even Speaker Philip Gunn had said before that the state cannot afford to eliminate the income tax without revenue offsets. The nonpartisan Center for Budget and Policy Priorities wrote in Kansas's experience, quote, the Kansas experience adds that the already compelling evidence that cutting taxes does not improve state economic performance. Even state economists Corey Miller and Sandra Collins warned this month that in your original proposal, HB 531, losses to the state revenue would average almost $419 million annually from fiscal years 2023 through 2032. And that would be more than the projected gains in Mississippi's gross domestic product. So who do you listen to when it comes to projecting the impact of economic tax elimination?
Well, all those arguments are red herrings, Byron. None of those hold any water. Our plan is not the Kansas plan. That is just a scare tactic that the media and others try to use to dissuade people from being for income tax elimination. We've been very clear our plan is not the Kansas plan. The plan that we brought forward originally fully replaces the revenue. The plan that we have right now does put money back into the pockets of the citizens, but people need to understand the dollars that we have. Our budget this past year was $5.8 billion. Teacher pay raise that we gave is another $250 million. That takes you over $6 billion. You add up some of the other things that we did, and it takes you to about 6.2. So our total spending right now is about $6.2 billion. We have collected, however, $7 billion. That means we've collected $800 million more dollars from our taxpayers than we are currently spending. Our contention has been, we need to give some of that back to the taxpayers. So we are fully funding everything that we currently have budgeted, and we still have money left over. And the projections are that we will have another $7 billion next year. So our contention is, yes, we can spend some of that extra $800 million, but we also need to give some of it back to the taxpayers. So everything that you just read is nothing more than a political agenda being pushed by those who just don't want to do this. But the numbers don't back up their argument. And they know that. And the numbers that I've just quoted to you prove we not only have the money to do everything that the budget requires, we've got extra money left over. We're taking more from our citizens than we are spending. It's time to give some of that back to the taxpayers.
Yeah, well, and speaking of Kansas cut their income tax in 2012 and 2013, but by 2017, the elimination has been repealed, and they lost about $4.5 billion and roughly in their 2018 fiscal year. What did Kansas do that caused them to fail?
Well, two things. First of all, they had no replacement revenue, and they had a spending problem. They were spending more than they were taking in. That is not the case in Mississippi. So we're just not the Kansas model. What we've done is not Kansas.
You know that you also authored a bill in the House that allows voters in your hometown of Clinton to consider a 2% restaurant tax. Revenue would go toward promoting tourism within the city. Talk about that and why you find that sort of a user tax to be acceptable, and when you, at the same time, when you're trying to cut income tax.
Well, that's a great question, and the viewers need to understand what we call local and private bills. There's a separate provision under our Constitution to pass what we call local and private bills. These are bills that don't have statewide application. They are confined to a geographic area, and under those types of bills, the city council and the mayor of whatever town you're talking about has to pass a resolution requesting that this be allowed. The legislature every year is very routine. We pass local and privates that give various municipalities around the state the right to vote on whether they want to tax hotels and restaurants. Those local and privates are confined only to hotels and restaurants. So the way this works is the city council has to pass a resolution saying they want this. The legislature then gives the citizens of that town the right to vote. So a referendum still has to follow, not necessarily implemented until the citizens vote to implement it, but the tax only goes on to hotels and restaurants, which generally, theoretically, are people who choose to come from out of town and stay there. It is not a sales tax. It's simply on hotels and restaurants. And it's very common, and it exists all over the state of Mississippi.
Other bills out of this session include the medical marijuana program. The health department working on that right now. How satisfied are you? How things are going, and are you satisfied that this will be working out for the citizens of Mississippi?
Well, we worked very hard to make sure that, as you know, the referendum was passed a couple of years ago by the citizens, indicating that they wanted a medical marijuana program. Very hard for the legislature to ignore the fact that 75% of the people voted, stating that they wanted a medical marijuana program. As you know, the Supreme Court struck down the way that was developed. So the legislature then had to come forward and develop a program. We were very concerned that it be truly medical marijuana. We want to avoid the situation where it turns into a recreational use. I think the bill that was passed served to accomplish that. We also put in there an opportunity for towns who don't want to participate to opt out. And I think there's about 10 so far that have opted out. In the Jackson area, I think you've had Brandon and Madison and Ridgeland and Clinton, maybe others that have voted, their city council has voted not to participate in the dispensing of medical marijuana products. So we tried to find a way to achieve what the citizens said what they wanted without turning it into a recreational program and giving citizens or cities around the state the opportunity not to participate if they didn't want to.
We asked you on the program several months ago about what lawmakers might do to further support rural hospitals and healthcare access across Mississippi. You noted that you'd not heard many new requests of state support, but this session, the House passed a bill that paves the way for creating so-called freestanding emergency rooms in underserved areas of the state. A report by MississippiToday.org late last year found that 6 rural hospitals in our state have closed since 2014, and 64% of the rural hospitals that are left are at high risk of shutting down. Do you think your chamber did all it could this session to shore up our rural healthcare networks?
Only a step in the right direction. We recognize the challenges that rural hospitals face. I think many of them are reevaluating how they go about providing health care. I think the legislature is going to have to continue to take a look at that moving forward. We recognize that's a real challenge around the state. The rural hospitals have been struggling to find ways to be profitable. I think we've got to reevaluate how those services are provided. I think the House took a big step in the right direction with the passage of that bill, but it's going to be a continuous source of conversation as we move forward.
You declined to allow full House consideration of a Senate bill to extend Medicaid coverage postpartum from 2 months to 12. Why did you do that?
Well, we've been very clear that we don't believe that Medicaid expansion is in the traditional sense is a positive thing for the state. We've been very clear that we need to find ways to help people get off of Medicaid, not put more on. It is my understanding with this particular coverage that that's what it proposes to do. It's proposes to expand coverage from 2 months to 12. Now, if I'm wrong in that, I stand to be corrected. The Department of Medicaid, however, is the agency charged with the responsibility to guide us on things like that. The Department of Medicaid has not made any statement in support of postpartum coverage, nor have they indicated to me that I'm wrong in the position that I have taken. So I would think that that is a question more properly addressed to them. If they come out and they indicate that this is the direction that we must go or should go, then we'll certainly consider that. But right now, they have not said that we're wrong, and they've not given any indication that they favor or support the extension of postpartum coverage.
So you would be totally against it if they said, hey, this is needed for certain reasons.
Well, I don't know. I don't know until I understand. If they come out and say, this is what we think, then we will evaluate what they think. I don't know that I would agree or not agree. I'm just telling you that I have said I'm not in favor of Medicaid expansion. This appears to be Medicaid expansion. They've not told me that it's not. They've not told me that I'm wrong. And they've issued no statement in support of postpartum coverage. So I think the only conclusion you can draw is that the Medicaid division or the Department of Medicaid is they're not in favor of it, and they don't disagree with my position.
A lot of political observers note that among the things that didn't get done in 2022, there was no restoration of the ballot initiative process, which the state Supreme Court struck down last year amid the medical marijuana debate. Is this a failure that you lay out on the Senate's shoulders?
Well, I will tell you that we passed it. We brought forward a bill, passed it out of the House, and sent it down there that restores the initiative process. And for the viewers, what that means is that they will recall in the medical marijuana issue that you have to gather a requisite number of signatures. Those are verified, then it's put on the ballot for a vote of the people. This gives the citizens the right to put policy items before the public for a vote. We've done it on a lot of different issues. We did it on fully funded MAP a few years ago. We did it on voter ID. There was one for a personhood amendment once upon a time. There was this one on medical marijuana, so on and so forth. It gives the citizens the right to put issues before the public for a vote. Supreme Court struck that down. We passed a bill this year that made just a couple of changes, we think improvements to that process. One is we said that we adjusted the number of congressional districts that have to be used to get the initiative passed. We just changed the language from 5 to ever how many there are. That was the big issue with the Supreme Court striking down the initiative. So we fixed that. And we also said rather than an initiative, anything that passed going into the Constitution, we would put it into the statutes, which is what the legislature does.
Big thanks to House Speaker Philip Gunn for joining us this week. We'll be back next weekend with more of the political and current affairs coverage that you demand. I'm Byron Brown. From all of us here at 12 News, make it a great weekend.